You can install the best controllers, the fastest networks, the most sophisticated historians, and the most expensive operator stations, yet still create a control system that becomes fragile the moment the plant leaves normal operation. That is the uncomfortable truth behind many automation failures. The problem is rarely one defective component. The problem is the architecture between components, the assumptions between disciplines, the gaps between project delivery and plant operation, and the absence of clear ownership when the system begins to degrade. A control system is not a collection of hardware packages. It is the operating nervous system of the facility. It determines how the plant senses conditions, how information moves, how decisions are made, who can act, what happens when communications fail, how abnormalities are presented, how maintenance teams diagnose problems, how remote users gain access, and whether operations can continue safely when supporting systems disappear. When you design control systems as equipment lists, you miss the real engineering problem. The real problem is the complete operational loop. You measure the physical process, validate the data, interpret the condition, decide what action is required, execute the action, and verify the result. Measure, understand, decide, act, and confirm. Every weakness in that loop becomes an operational weakness. You may have accurate instruments, but the data may not reach the people who need it. You may have a historian full of values, but nobody may know whether those values are reliable, stale, substituted, or failed. You may have an optimization application calculating better operating targets, but the route for safely applying those targets may never have been engineered. You may have remote support capability, but no clear control over who connects, what they can reach, how long access remains active, or how access is revoked. You may have thousands of alarms, but only a small percentage may require meaningful operator action. The first principle is therefore simple. Design the architecture around the operating decision, not around the equipment package. Begin with what the operator, engineer, maintenance planner, or automated function must achieve. Then work backwards to the data required and forward to the action that must occur. The second principle is separation. The process control environment and the enterprise environment must communicate, but they must not become operationally dependent on each other. The process control domain contains the systems that directly influence monitoring, control, safeguarding, equipment operation, and immediate operator response. This domain must remain capable of safe and stable operation, even when external networks, business applications, remote support systems, or historians are unavailable. If losing the office network stops process control, the architecture is wrong. If losing the historian prevents safe operation, the architecture is wrong. If losing a remote control room link removes local safety capability, the architecture is wrong. If a corporate workstation can directly modify critical protection functions, the architecture is wrong. The enterprise environment can support planning, optimization, reporting, production accounting, maintenance management, and long-term analysis. But the loss of those systems should not immediately destabilize the plant. Between these environments, you need a controlled access boundary. Not an accidental network connection, not an unmanaged switch port, not a temporary commissioning modem, and not a permanent vendor tunnel installed for convenience. You need an engineered, monitored, auditable, and controlled access path. Every permitted connection should have a defined purpose, direction, owner, authentication method, privilege level, failure response, and test requirement. Connectivity is not integration. Two systems exchanging data does not mean the interface has been engineered. True integration requires you to define which system owns the data, how frequently the data moves, how quality is indicated, how timestamps are managed, how command validation occurs, what happens when communication fails, how conflicting commands are prevented, and how changes are audited. Without these decisions, you have connectivity without governance. Remote operations make these issues even more important. Moving the human-machine interface to another building does not create remote operation. Remote operation changes authority, communication, operator workload, span of control, and failure consequences. The operating philosophy must define what can be done locally, what can be done remotely, what must never be done remotely, how control authority is transferred, and what happens when communications disappear during an operation. Just because the technology can perform an action remotely does not mean the architecture should permit it. Control authority must remain unambiguous. A local operator, remote operator, optimization application, and engineering user must never compete for the same operating command. The system must make control ownership visible. Local control selection should be positively indicated locally and remotely. Remote users may retain visibility while control actions are inhibited. Transfers of authority should be deliberate, controlled, and auditable. Automatic set point changes should operate within approved limits, and changes outside those limits should require validation. The person responsible for the plant must never discover afterwards that another system changed the plant. Remote operations must also fail locally, not fail remotely. If communication to the central control room is lost, each facility must still contain enough local intelligence to maintain a predetermined safe operating condition. Depending on the process, the facility may continue operating under local control, reduce production, enter a stable degraded mode, or initiate a controlled shutdown. The correct response depends on risk, but uncontrolled uncertainty is never acceptable. Communication failure is not an exceptional event to discuss after commissioning. It is an operating state that must be designed, tested, and trained. The same discipline applies to the human-machine interface. The HMI is not a digital process drawing. A process drawing documents the plant. An HMI helps a human operate the plant. The operator needs to understand what is happening, what is changing, what is abnormal, how serious the condition is, what action is available, and what may happen next. Information that does not support those questions should not dominate the display. You do not improve situational awareness by showing more information. You improve situational awareness by showing the right information in the right context. HMI design must begin with operator tasks. Study normal operation startup, shutdown, equipment changeover, process transition, plant upset, instrument failure, communication loss, control system degradation, and emergency response. The operator's workload, information needs, and available response time change in each condition. During normal operation, the interface should support awareness. The operator should see operating trends, constraints, margins, equipment status, and developing deviations before alarms occur. During abnormal conditions, the system should support exception handling. The alarm should attract attention, the display should show context, navigation should be direct, and the available controls should be clear. A strong display hierarchy moves from overview to detail. Plant overview, unit overview, subunit, equipment detail, and individual control information. The operator should understand this structure without memorizing dozens of unrelated screens. Critical navigation should remain shallow. When an alarm occurs, the operator should reach the relevant operating display within very few actions. Every unnecessary navigation step consumes attention and time. Overview displays should show condition, not every valve, instrument, and process line. Detailed graphics belong at lower levels. Trends should be used where direction matters. An instantaneous value tells you where the process is now. A trend tells you where it is going. Color should carry meaning, not decoration. Normal operation should remain visually quiet. Abnormal conditions should stand out. Urgent conditions should be unmistakable. Do not rely on color alone. Use symbols, shapes, text, position, and sound where required. Flashing should remain rare because it is effective only when it is exceptional. Integrated operation also means the operator should not be forced to think in vendor boundaries. The operator cares about the compressor, the furnace, the process unit, and the operating condition. The operator should not have to remember which package vendor owns each measurement or which separate terminal contains the required information. Package integration must therefore be engineered early. Compressors, turbines, analyzers, electrical systems, and specialist equipment often arrive with their own controllers, alarm conventions, and operator interfaces. If integration requirements are delayed, the control room becomes a collection of unrelated screens, accounts, alarm philosophies, and support contracts. The objective is not to place every function inside one controller. The objective is to give the operator one coherent operational picture while preserving the independence required for specialist and protective functions. Protective systems must remain independent. The process control system keeps the plant within the operating envelope. The protective system acts when prevention has failed and hazardous limits are approached. The HMI may display protective system status, first out information, and authorized reset functions, but convenience must not erode functional independence. Remote access must not become remote modification of protection logic. A cybersecurity compromise of normal control must not automatically compromise independent protection. Alarm management requires the same discipline. An alarm exists because the operator must know about an abnormal condition and perform a meaningful action within an available time. If no operator action is required, the condition may be an event, maintenance notification, message, or historical record, but it should not automatically become an alarm. Every alarm must earn its place. For every proposed alarm, ask what condition it indicates, what consequence develops if no action is taken, what action the operator should perform, how much time is available, whether the action is physically possible, whether another alarm already communicates the same problem, and whether automation would respond more reliably. Alarm priority should follow consequence and available response time, not personal opinion. When the required action must occur faster than a human can realistically respond, the solution is automation or protection, not a louder alarm. Alarm flooding is usually a design failure. After a major trip, the operator does not need hundreds of secondary notifications explaining that the equipment has stopped. The operator needs the initiating cause, the automatic responses, the remaining abnormalities, and the next required action. First-out logic, consequential alarm suppression, representative alarms, and state-based alarming can reduce confusion, but suppression must remain visible and controlled. The operator should know what is suppressed, why it is suppressed, and when normal alarming will return. Data quality must travel with the data. A wrong value presented confidently is more dangerous than no value. Important information should indicate whether the measurement is valid, failed, stale, manually substituted, estimated, unavailable, or based on a last known value. Time synchronization must also be treated as an engineering requirement. When control systems, protective systems, package controllers, electrical protection, and historians record the same event with different clocks, event reconstruction becomes guesswork. Accurate timestamps support trip analysis, root cause investigation, alarm sequencing, equipment diagnosis, and incident review. The historian should become operational memory, not a data dump. Define what data is stored, the collection rate, compression method, retention period, naming convention, quality handling, ownership, buffering, and access rights. The historian must not become a hidden dependency for real-time control. Every important data type should also have one authoritative owner. Multiple copies may exist, but multiple owners create inconsistency. Drawings, asset registers, alarm databases, control configuration, and field installations must not quietly become different versions of reality. Good architecture is designed around degraded modes. Ask what happens when controllers, operator stations, historians, servers, network switches, remote links, time services, package interfaces, or field bus segments fail. Do not stop at the statement that redundancy is provided. Redundancy is a mechanism. The real question is whether the plant can still be operated safely and effectively. Connected control systems must also have a deliberate isolation capability. You may need to terminate individual remote sessions, block selected communication paths, or isolate the process control domain from the enterprise environment. The action must be designed, tested, and understood by operations. The organization should know who can order isolation, who performs it, what functionality is lost, how the plant continues, how reconnection is authorized, and how the system is verified before restoration. Remote access is a privilege, not a convenience. It should be authorized, role limited, time limited where practical, application limited, logged, monitored, reviewed, and revocable. Portable media, contractor laptops, and engineering workstations must be included in the security model because they can bypass carefully designed network boundaries. Change management is equally critical. Automation systems change continuously. Alarm limits, graphics, tuning parameters, software versions, access privileges, and network configurations all change. A software modification is still an engineering change. Every change should have a defined purpose, impact assessment, test method, approval, rollback plan, document update, and backup. Backups that have never been restored are assumptions. Recovery capability must be demonstrated through restoration testing. Standardization strengthens resilience. Common graphics, naming conventions, alarm rules, architectures, interfaces, and support methods reduce cognitive load, simplify training, and improve lifecycle maintenance. However, standardization should not become blind uniformity. Standardize what should be common and justify what must be different. Brownfield facilities require staged migration. You may not be able to replace legacy controllers, proprietary networks, unsupported operating systems, and fragmented HMIs in one project. Begin with the highest risks. Secure uncontrolled connections, establish network boundaries, remove unmanaged remote pathways, improve recovery capability, rationalize severe alarm problems, and define a target architecture for future projects. The target architecture prevents every small modification from creating another incompatible solution. The final management principle is ownership. Projects are temporary, assets are permanent. Before handover, determine who supports each component, owns each interface, manages access, patches systems, updates graphics, rationalizes alarms, restores backups, maintains cybersecurity, and controls future changes. A system without a sustainable support model begins degrading on the day it enters service. The ultimate test is not whether the system works during the factory acceptance test. Imagine the most demanding, credible operating day. A process disturbance begins, one package trips, several instruments become unreliable, alarms multiply, enterprise communications are lost, remote specialists are requesting access, operators are under pressure, and maintenance teams need diagnostics. Can the operator identify the initiating problem? Can the plant remain stable without enterprise systems? Is protection still independent? Is control authority clear? Can remote access be restricted or disconnected? Can the event be reconstructed accurately? Does everyone know who owns each problem? If the answers are clear, you have designed an operational architecture. If the answers depend on assumptions, vendor promises, or improvised procedures, you have only connected equipment. The strongest control system is not the system with the most automation, screens, or connectivity. It is the system that gives the right person or machine the right information, authority, and response capability at the right time, while preventing everything else from interfering. Design the measurements, controls, networks, interfaces, alarms, graphics, security boundaries, degraded modes, recovery procedures, and support responsibilities as one system. Then test them together, because the plant will experience them together. Share this episode with engineers, operators, maintenance specialists, and project leaders who are designing or inheriting complex automation systems. Leave your experiences in the comments, especially the architecture failures, alarm problems, integration gaps, and recovery lessons that change the way you approach engineering. Like this episode, subscribe to the channel, and follow my LinkedIn newsletter, Standards and Recommended Practices Simplified, for more practical guidance on engineering design, control systems, project execution, and lifecycle reliability.